We want to bring in CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, you are coming to us from Capitol Hill. So what's the reaction been from both the Republicans and the Democrats?
Well, this has really scrambled the political calculus for a number of senators, and things are very up in the air at this point, Anne Marie, as senators return to Washington from a weekend away and try to grapple with what all this means for the timing of this nomination. First of all, you've got Democrats, all of those who have spoken out publicly so far, saying you've got to put a hold on this nomination. There has to be a pause. The Senate Judiciary Committee was supposed to vote on this on Thursday. They argue that the FBI should get involved and take witness statements because this allegation, they say, is credible and serious. Republicans are a little more all over the map. You've got the Republican chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee saying, look, these are uncorroborated allegations from 35 years ago, but he's willing to get more information from both Ford and Kavanaugh on what happened. What form does that information take? He and some other Republicans have suggested perhaps their staffers should talk by phone with Ford and Kavanaugh this week before the vote. Democrats say that's not good enough. And now, according to her lawyer, Ford is saying that she'd actually be willing to testify before the committee publicly about what happened. The fact that she has now come forward publicly, revealed her identity, and says she's willing to testify puts Republicans in a sticky situation. It would be very difficult for them to say, no, actually, we don't want to hear from you when you are willing to come forward. And so all of this is up in the air because they have not extended a formal invitation to her to testify. She lives in California, so the notion that this would be able to happen before the scheduled Thursday vote it's a pretty slim possibility. And so, we start to see the possibility that the timing of this vote will slip. And that's important, of course, because Republicans have really been hoping that they could hold a vote in the committee and on the Senate floor before the Supreme Court term begins in October and before Democrats and Republicans are up for re-election in November, which could scramble the balance of power here on Capitol Hill.
And speaking of that balance of power, Nancy, even if the White House decides to press forward with Kavanaugh as their pick, when Mitch McConnell takes a look at the political landscape, and now you've got Jeff Flake who's suggesting that he may be wavering. You've got a couple of women who are senators like Susan Collins, it's going to be difficult to go back to her constituents as a woman, I think, as a senator, to say, look, I didn't have time to pay attention to this woman's allegations. If Mitch McConnell feels he doesn't have the vote, it doesn't really matter what the White House wants to do, right? The type of leader that McConnell is.
Sure, but he has his own political calculus to make. He knows that if he says to the White House, look, we should cut bait here, we should look at another nominee, it's highly unlikely that the Senate could push another nominee through the confirmation process before the midterm elections. And then, what if Democrats manage to retake the Senate in November? What does that do? So that's a risk that Republicans don't want to take. And you also have a question, what happens to those 3 Democratic senators who haven't said yet whether they are going to vote for or against Kavanaugh? These are 3 Democratic senators from red states: Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Donnelly of Indiana. They're all up for re-election in the fall, and the conventional wisdom up until this point was that they would end up voting for Kavanaugh the way that they did for Neil Gorsuch because of the unique political considerations that they have, where they know that they've got to win over some Republican votes in their states if they want to get reelected. Well, maybe they don't have to worry about that now. Maybe that they can make a credible case that they liked a lot of things about him, but given this most recent allegation, they're going to vote no. So perhaps the votes that Republicans assumed they would have at the end of the day, they may not have now. And so that's why we're suddenly in this unique limbo situation where the political calculus has changed for so many people that we really don't know where the chips are going to fall. Now, there are Republicans who argue, look, this is one allegation from 35 years ago, from high school. How seriously should we take this allegation. That is one factor. Another factor is you've got Kavanaugh denying that this ever happened. Does that strengthen his case, or does it weaken it, given the fact that Ford appears to have therapist notes dating back to 2012 in which she outlined what happened to her? All of these are questions that we just don't know the answer to yet, because it's all so fresh and was such a surprise when Ford came forward yesterday, went public with her story in the Washington Post.
Lots of things to consider. My feeling, I guess, is that it's going to get a little uglier before it gets a little better. Nancy Cordes, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.